Welcome back to Elim Chew TV. Today I bring to you someone who is really inspiring because his name is Adrian Anantawan, a world-class level musician. But you will be excited to see how he overcame his disability to be one of the best musicians at concert level where he plays in different parts of the world. So do listen to him because he has a collaborative project that's coming up that's inspiring too. It's virtual music instrument where he brings music back to people with disabilities where they can play music all over again and experience music in their life. So be inspired, and if you want to do more, do tune in here because this is a very exciting part of Changemaker series that we'll bring to you. Wow, here we are meeting with Adrian Anantawan. I think he's really inspiring. Let's hear from Adrian. Hi Adrian.
Hi, it's an honor to be here.
You have inspired me, and I think a lot of people as well.
Thank you.
Share with us your story.
Well, I was born without a right hand. The doctors theorized an umbilical cord wrapped around it and kept it from growing. So I think that difference was something that was always very authentic to me, and it didn't feel weird or foreign in the end. If anything, I think eventually the only thing that felt foreign were people's reactions to who I was. And I think it's really interesting that like your peers in your outside environment define your acceptance of yourself or not, and yet at the same time, internally, we're trying to develop our own sense of the world, and the only people who really know our own truth are ourselves in the end. And I think that I've begun to realize over the time that I've grown up and learning to accept myself for who I am, especially through music and playing music, is that the world needs people who are completely honest with themselves. And through that honesty, this humility of being able to say, it's not whether I'm good or bad, it's just I am who I am, I'm a human being with the same problems and the same desire to succeed as any other person. How do I do this in the way that is uniquely my own? Because I think that our spirits have the same type of like uniqueness as like our fingerprints in a way. This entire sense of like, you make an imprint upon the world that is yours alone, but to what extent you want that to be something that's bold versus something that's a little hands-off, for instance, is really based upon your passion and belief in what you do. I think that for me, like things that have gone in the way are attitudes, really. As in like, this is how the world should work. And like from like early on in childhood, my peers, for instance, this is how a child should look. 2 hands, you know, no neurocognitive deficits or anything like that. Face, you know, generally like the same structure. So when that doesn't align for a child, like, oh, how the world should work, there are 2 ways to deal with it, is to be curious and open and more accepting. And most of the times, without the proper education, it's actually the opposite, where it's like, oh, I'm just gonna keep this out of my life. I'm not gonna try to deal with it, or worse yet, try to alleviate that discomfort by teasing or like making fun of someone. And I was definitely exposed to that a lot. I mean, it came to a point where like, I was very ashamed of who I was just because I was who I was. And that was like very difficult because I didn't really understand that at the time. And I think a lot of times I just created like these lies to myself, like, hey, maybe I'm like, you know, a karate master, for instance, or maybe, you know, I'm like really smart or something like that. And I'll define myself like that sort of deal. And that was like an escape in a way. And I think that for me, being able to confront myself and say, well, okay, I am different and this is hurtful, and taking a deep breath and just letting it go and just trusting, well, that's what makes you normal, actually, was a really interesting realization for me. And the idea of like being able to have certain activities or do certain things that despite that issue of like not feeling worthy in some way to be part of the human race, that I could, as an outsider, lift people up because I understood what that pain was like. Just like I know like a lot of students here have a tremendous pressure to be able to succeed in the way that the world defines success, this normative success, and not realizing that the greatest success that you have is being fully yourself, to practicing the skills that reveal yourself and your passions and your innate desire to make the world a better place. Because I believe that everyone has that desire, but they don't act upon it, or they feel like it's impossible because of their background. Maybe they don't feel like they're smart enough. Maybe they don't feel like they're physically able to do something. And yet, at the same time, like any time that in my life I've actually tried to strive for that, rather than run away from it, I've always grown. And the connection that I have to another person, even if it is uncomfortable, even if it can be painful or just puts you out and makes you shake, sort of deal, is something that is worthwhile in the end. And I think it's something I encourage of students, to not only to be yourself, but to be humble in a sense of every person that you encounter, you have to see the best possible sides of them. Because once you practice that for others, sometimes that reflects back on you. It's like, if I can see this in someone who I fear or someone who's different than me, hey, maybe I can do that for myself as well.